Very discombobulated. I turned off my flip source so that when I show yarns, which I don't think I'm going to do this episode, but I thought it would be better to get used to it. So I'm used to seeing this shelf on this side of me and the camera, and the bookshelf over here on this side. Like, it all looks normal to you, but it's just kind of backwards. So now I get why everyone is like, ah, which way do I point? Hello, and welcome to Losing My Knit, Vlogmas 2024, aka 12 Days of Knitmas. I'm Jeff, and this is day 9, where I'm going to talk about cruise knitting or knitting while on cruises. I also love that I did not put that up. That's from the last episode, if you want to know what that is and why that's there, and I will point at it again later this episode. So we actually do quite a bit of cruising. I took my first cruise with my partner way back, not long after we started dating. I think like maybe 3 or 4 years, probably less than that, maybe 2.5 years. We did a cruise to Alaska, and it was really cool. Like if you only do one cruise, go to Alaska. One, the ice caps are melting, so you may not see them, but it's also just so big, and you can't really talk about how big it is. Like, you just have to experience it. Yeah, so that one we did, we left from Seattle, went up to Skagway, Juneau, and Ketchikan. One of those we drove into the Yukon, so the first part of Canada I ever went to was actually the Yukon, even though there's, like, Canada 2.5 hours north of us. And then we ended in Victoria and flew home, or we might have gotten back to Seattle, but we went to Victoria and saw the Bouchard Gardens. So that was my first cruise, and then the way my partner's continuing education credits work is they often offer programs on cruise ships, and so his work will pay for him to go and sit in class all day when we're at sea, and so I get to tag along. And so when we're at sea, I get all day to myself, or 6 of the 8 hours to myself. And also I will sit outside occasionally, but I burn very easily. I'm pretty fair-skinned, and you can't really see them, but I have a ton of freckles. You can see them on my arm. Those are all freckles. They're everywhere. So I tend to burn very easily, so I usually sit indoors. And so one of the things I do is I knit. So that's one of the reasons I love to knit on cruise ships, is because I get 4 hours uninterrupted, then we'll go to lunch, then I get 3 or 4 more hours uninterrupted, and then I can knit at night. So I can make a lot of progress. And depending on where we're cruising, it can either be really warm or really cold. Or my second favorite cruise was actually one we did this past year after I graduated. That one, and this will be the first one that's probably my second favorite one. I'll talk about it, and then I'll go talk about the other one. We went to Scandinavia, and it was the coolest. We flew over to England, so left from Southampton, the port in Southampton. From there, we went to Denmark, and then Helsinki, Finland, followed by Tallinn, Estonia, and then Stockholm, Sweden, Visby, Gotland, which is, I mentioned before, it's where that bag came from that is full of yarn. We went to Visby, so it's in Gotland, the Gotland Sheep, and then we went to Skagen, Denmark, which, similar to Visby, is kind of like a resort island. And I say resort island, but it's a vacation island where people go to vacation. And then we went back to Southampton and flew home. Yeah, so from there, I will put the photo right here, as per usual. In order, you will first see my yarn from Tallinn. I talked about the other yarn yesterday, but I figured some photos would be nice. Tallinn, and then you'll see the yarn shop that we went to in Stockholm. The woman was absolutely lovely. If you kind of look the very, very middle, you might see her doing this in the yarn store. That made me laugh. And then this next photo, I didn't realize it, but we had gone to the bookstore earlier in the day, and I bought a copy of Wuthering Heights in Swedish, and then they had this beautiful copy of Pride and Prejudice, and so I bought it, and then apparently my yarn matched my books, and so I was like, that's hilarious. Didn't realize it until I was taking photos at the end of the day. These next two, the petrol and kind of like an ice blue, are from Helsinki, another beautiful, beautiful city. Loved it. The library there is stunning. Go check it out. And then these next 4 photos are from Visby. So I'm not going to pronounce any of those store names, but the first one is me standing outside. We walked through this earlier in the day. This isn't far from the first, it'll be the 4th photo, but it was the first store we went to where I had bought some wool, beautiful gray wool, you'll see. And then we decided to, I kept thinking about the linen, and I was like, I want to go back, I want to get some linen. When we went back to get the linen from that shop, this store had hung yarn up in this archway. And so I was just like, this is the coolest thing, take my picture, take my picture. And then the following one is this is the softest yarn. I think it's a Gotland Merino mix. It is so soft. I think I'm going to make, that one I'm not sure about. I thought I was going to make a hat, but it's actually, this next one is the one Tim, actually, my partner Tim, bought to make a hat. I've got a couple of ideas. We looked up some Fair Isle or colorwork type hats that I'm gonna make out of that, and then this final one is the 2 linen and the 2 wool that I got from the first store we went to, and then stumbled across all these other stores. This final one is a bag from Skagen, which is part of Denmark. It's one of my knitting bags. I need to use it. I need to swap it right now. It's for a blanket project that stays in my office. But I feel like it should be a bag for when I travel or when I'm in public, so that people know, like, yes, I'm knitting, but also, like, give me some space. I don't know. It makes me happy. But that's definitely my top 3 cruises. So Alaska's up there, Scandinavia's up there, and then the third one is actually. We took 3 years ago, when I first got into the program I got into, and it left from Boston. Love a cruise that leaves from Boston. We used to live 10 minutes from the cruise port. We're probably half an hour now, but leaving and coming back to Boston is like so simple. Love it. This one went from Boston and then went up to Bar Harbor, Maine, 2 stops in Nova Scotia, Quebec City, Prince Edward Island, Portland, Maine, and then back to Boston. It was the closest you can get to sort of the grandiosity of Alaska on the East Coast. Everything felt so big. It didn't have the mountains that Alaska did, where Alaska you can like be sailing towards the coast and you'll see a mountain and it's massive, and then like 2 hours later you're still sailing towards the coast and it's massive, and then you get closer and it's just even bigger. So like it didn't quite have that, but it just sort of the openness of and the natural beauty of especially Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia. Even though we were in cities for Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island too, we did take tours around the islands and the area that showed us how beautiful it was. I've talked about this a couple of times, but this photo is the yarn from the 5 stops that we made that I'm going to turn into one of the shawls. I also spent most of that cruise in this t-shirt, it's a sweatshirt. I made it a sweatshirt. It's Look at My Holes by James Watts. He designed it as like a crop top short sleeve, but I wanted it more of a pullover sweatshirt weight, and so like I could wear it to the pool over a tank top, I could wear it on an excursion over a t-shirt and shorts. And it was wonderful. It was a cotton material. I accidentally shrunk it. I didn't realize cotton could shrink. Like, I should have known that. So I've given it to one of my partner's cousins, and I've got yarn to make another one. But then we also, so I talked about my partner's continuing ed credits. So those are generally Caribbean. And we try and take those in sort of January, February, March when it's super cold here in Boston. And so we've been I think I have a list, and that's not all of them, but we've been to the ABC Islands, we've done Puerto Rico, the British and Virgin Islands, done at least one island for both of those, the Dominican Republic, St. Martin, St. Kitts, Bermuda, Tortola, and so we've done a whole bunch of those islands. And one of the things, like I said, I really like to knit when I'm on those cruises. I'll like knit for 2 hours, read for 2 hours, and I'm in and out of the pool, the indoor pool, while I'm doing that. So I've actually knit quite a few gift knits and some of my bigger projects there. So these, we'll start, my So Basic sweater, oh yeah, I'll find a photo, I'll put a photo up. It's, that one was actually from our Scandinavian cruise. I cast on the airplane, over to the UK, knit, part of the collar, and then went to sleep and slept through the night. And then I just had a goal of, by the time we got off the ship, I wanted to be to sleeve separation. It's fingering weight, larger size, it was going to take a while. And I got there. I did reach my goal. In the last trip we took in October, I made 2 gift knits. So this is the Paris de Jour shawl for one of my former employees, and then this is the Skylar shawl again for my boss that I had just left, for the job that I just left. And so I really used the time on cruise ships to crank out projects. Like, I just, uninterrupted knitting doesn't happen when I'm at home. I do usually get about an hour in the mornings, and I can knit when we're watching TV in the evenings, but I don't necessarily have that uninterrupted time. But these 2 photos, so the first one, I'm actually not sure which, oh no, it's on the same ship. So this was this past January. So this first one is a sea day. You'll see I've got my iPad, and I actually took a yarn bowl this time. I'm not 100% sure why I took a yarn bowl. I don't usually. But you'll see I'm knitting facing the windows, looking out to sea. And then the second photo is same trip, much further along in the shawl, and it was at Tortola. And we've been to Tortola a few times. And so we decided not to get off the ship because it would be a quieter day. And so I knit for a little bit. My partner probably took a nap, maybe read, and it was beautiful. We did that, and then we actually went to one of the new outdoor pools on the ship. It was a newer ship that we hadn't been on before, and so that was a lot of fun. The other reason that I really enjoy knitting on cruise ships is just everybody is so friendly. I'll turn 40 in a couple of days. And so we're generally some of the younger people on these cruise ships, and a lot of retirees take them, so we're talking 60, 65, sometimes into the 70s, and it's funny when people come up to me, they'll at all different times, it's different reasons, different things that they'll say. A lot of times it's like, oh, I've never seen a man knit, or oh, it's so great to see young people knitting. And it always starts a conversation. Invariably, it's a conversation when I'm getting to a hard part, and I'm like, okay, let me just pause for a sec, we'll chat, and then I'm like, how do I get you to go away? I want to keep knitting. But I know that's part of knitting in public, is you have to be willing to have those conversations. Wonderful, wonderful conversations, and generally, day 2 or day 3 or towards the end of the trip, people recognize me and they're like, hey, you're the knitter. Or one of my favorites was when I was working on that kinship shawl. We had gone to one of the restaurants for dinner, and we got in the elevator, and this woman goes, you're the knitter, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, I am. She goes, are you a Miami fan? And I was like, huh? She goes, that shawl you're knitting, it's Miami colors. And that's when I realized this kinship shawl was Miami. I just liked the colors. I think those were the first 2 colors of the bands I had on my braces growing up. So I didn't even think about it. And then I was like, oh yeah, that is Miami, isn't it? And then I think the cruise before that, there was this lovely woman. She was there, her husband didn't want to do anything, so she was always at the pool, and she sat by us one day, and we just chatted most of the day, and she's just like, yeah, I just make hats. I've only made hats for 40 years. That's just what I make. And it was just fun. It was fun, and she makes all different kinds, like cables, and she makes up her own patterns when she's doing them, and so, it's that connection is really great. And then the last story from the cruise ships is when we were actually on the one in the northeast US going up to Canada, we sat in the same chairs every day, and you know, I would sit down and I would knit, and I was like halfway through the cruise, a couple days into the cruise, you know, a lot of the staff will also be like, oh, that's so cool, you know, like we see people knitting all the time, but we don't usually see men or younger people. And one of the staff came up to me and she said, could I ask something? I was like, sure. And she had a pair of mittens that she'd bought, machine made, very fine. It's probably somewhere between a lace and a fingering. And they had been snipped at the top. And she asked if I could repair it. And I said, well, I don't have anything that matches it, but I probably can. And I said, just leave it with me, give me a day or two. And so I was able to kind of, you know, use a needle and some leftover thread that I had. It didn't match, not thread, yarn. It didn't match, but I was able to actually sort of get a close enough gauge with the needle to tie it off and really make it more secure. And so that was, I felt like, I hope she'll remember me. I feel like that's one of those things, because they were clearly this, I think she was from somewhere in the Caribbean, and this was her first time up in Canada, and she'd bought these mittens as a souvenir, and then like they'd broken almost immediately. So that was kind of a cool thing. I keep going with stories. I just have so many stories. This last trip, we did one in October, repositioning from Boston to Fort Lauderdale. It's when the ships are moved for the next season, and we went through Bermuda and then the ABC Islands, Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. There was a woman, very friendly, who came up to me one day and we were chatting about podcasts. And then as we were chatting one night, we ran into her at the buffet. She asked where we were from, where we lived, and we live about 3 blocks from the school she went to, the high school she went to, and we were telling her the streets around us and the street we lived on, and she's like, oh my god, that's where so-and-so lived, and oh, that's where we got in trouble, and my husband, when he was like, well, you can move out here and we can have a house of any size, she's like, I hated it, but I live there, and it's great now. So it's just kind of fun, those connections that you make. I think one of my favorite parts of knitting on cruises is actually being able to just take whatever I want. Obviously I have to be able to get it into my bag or my carry-on to get to where we leave from. Boston's the best, especially if we're coming back, because it doesn't matter how big it is, as long as you can carry it on the boat, they're going to let you do it. Yeah, and so I'll leave this peaceful photo. I love it when we leave a port and we kind of sail out. I think this was somewhere in Scandinavia, and just the hundreds of islands that were around were just very peaceful, and it was cool, and we were cool temperature-wise, and so I was able to sit out and knit while we sailed away from each of the ports. So yeah, how about you? Have you ever been on a cruise? Do you want to go on a cruise? I see a ton of knitting cruises. I think that Alaska cruise was a knitting cruise, but we didn't know it, and they did let me crash and sort of walk through their little mini shop section. I don't think I bought anything, I might have, but I was like, oh, this is really neat. I didn't know people did this. And so I've started to see a lot more, and I don't know if I would go on an actual knitting cruise. I probably would. Scandinavia, Iceland, hit me up, let's do it. But in general, love to knit on a cruise. If you haven't tried a cruise, or you just haven't found the right one, or you're worried about the people, I will say there's all different kinds. So like the ones we usually generally do celebrity, so it's an older group, quieter, very few families. But if you're all about the families, go do Disney, go do Carnival, we will pass. Yeah, so I love it. I have, like I said, I've got so much yarn from there. From various countries, because we've been able to cruise, and even the Caribbean countries generally do have yarn shops because people vacation there, especially if they have a lot of expats. So I'm looking forward to talking about the next couple of subjects, and I'm getting close to wrapping up. So casting off for now. I will see you in a few days.